Great. Good evening, and welcome to our live session. And we'll start here, and those that are on the other meeting will find us going. I don't want to waste much time because we already took 15 minutes, and we cannot wait much longer. The lessons is being recorded, so they can be able to go and view it on their reasonable time later. Um, So we are going to focus, or I'm going to start sharing my screen right now, and I'll draw your attention to what we're going to focus on tonight. And if you cannot hear me well, just let me know that you cannot hear me well, so I can also be able to change the position or speak a little bit louder. Or anything, if you want to say anything, you can just be able to raise your hand. And if you have a question, you can also be able to put it in the chats. I have started sharing my screen, and if you can see that, just let me know that you can see it so I can be able to continue. Can you see what is on my screen? I've shared my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, yes, sir, we can see.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sir, we can see it.
Okay, good, great. Thank you for the feedback. Okay, well, let me just draw your attention to the course outline first of all. Um, we last week we discussed, if I can not really last week, is it last week or the other? Actually, the second week, or rather the first week, we discussed about the understanding of concepts and their importance in education. That is the first. This is the first part that we discussed on the left in the first lesson, and tonight we are going to jump number two, understanding assessment policies in Namibia. And the reason we're going to jump this is I want us to have an online discussion where we're going to talk about where we're going to discuss these policies because there are a lot, number one, because we are majoring in different subjects and so forth. So if I bring junior primary or physics or mathematics, then you would not be able to discuss all of the policies. So we're going to have a discussion. I'm going to put on a discussion on the note on the announcement so we can be able to discuss those policies together. So that's why we're going to jump it up, but we're not going to leave it undiscussed. We're going to discuss it further. So that's why tonight we're going to focus on the principles of assessment, validity, and reliability of assessment. So we're going to focus on number three. That is what we're going to discuss tonight. Um, so this is the presentation that I've prepared. Just a minute. So assessment and evaluation, that is that. So the learning outcomes here, we're just going to at least focus on for us to discuss the four principles of assessment, which is fairness, flexibility, reliability, accountability, and validity. Let me just admit those that are coming in. Um, we're not going to continue. Okay. All right. So these are the learning outcomes that were expected out of this presentation, so you can be able to at least discuss the four principles and also be able to discuss the importance of validity and reliability, and as well as look at the techniques of establishing reliable and validity in assessment tools, as well as look at the factors that are influencing reliability and validity in assessment tools. So those are the things that we're going to discuss tonight. Um, and I hope by the end of this presentation, you know you have an idea or better understanding of these principles and these terms. So, what is really fairness? And then we are going to discuss these concepts looking at or basing them in assessment. We are not discussing them in general, but we are basing them on assessment. And then this, when you're talking about fairness, it refers to where learners are treated before, during, and after a method that is applied by the assessor. So these are the treatments that the treatments that the teacher treats learners before, during, and after the assessment process. Before you give an assessment, what type of treatment or what type of manner or what type of contact to contact yourself in. During the assessment, are you helping the learners or the learners answer the questions, or are you helping the struggling ones, or are you just there not doing anything? And then after the method of assessment, what are you going to what do you do? So for an assessment to be fair, sorry, the method of assessment should not present any barriers for the learners to achieve what they need to achieve. And then those barriers can be, for example, you are using too difficult language or too difficult words rather, then learners do not understand. That can also be a barrier. So the assessment, for it to be fair, it must not have barriers for learners to understand what you want them to to express what you have taught, and as well as must be free from bias and sensitivity from contextual factors, where, for example, your assessment is talking more about maybe a certain culture, for example, in a bad way, where some of the learners in your class belong to a certain culture, or you are talking more like the assessment is focusing more on the girls or the ladies, and then or it's focusing more on the gentlemen and so forth. So it shouldn't be biased. It should just be fair, that it accommodate all the learners. So it also be sensitive from gender issues, like I've explained earlier, the race, the cultural backgrounds and abilities, and it also must be communicated clearly, accurate, and meaningful, and also on time. So we can just be able to say those that are good with the reading, for example, have a good vocabulary, can be able to understand the assessment, while others cannot be able to do. So for an assessment to be fair, you should put all this into consideration. And then flexibility in assessment, we're looking at what are the concerns of the learners as an educator. At what level are you flexible with your learners to say, okay, this goes beyond now the administrator to say, okay, for example, I have learners that are struggling. Maybe they have disabilities, they cannot write well, or they have certain uh, like cognitive disabilities, they are not really able to think well. So what type of activities or what type of assessment activities that you give to those ones that are struggling, and what type of assessments do you give to those ones that are at a certain level, so that you can be able to accommodate all of them, so that your assessment can be fair, so that your assessment can also be able to look to assess all learners fairly, to say, okay, those ones that are not able to assess, I mean, to write, for example, or those ones are having difficult cognitive difficulties, I'm going to give them this type of assignment, for example, because you might find yourself in a class where you have a student that cannot be able to express themselves with writing. In writing, they cannot just write a complete sense of thought or complete sentence. How are you going to help this student? How are you going to assess this learner in a manner that he or she can also be able to benefit from this type of assessment, where he or she is having some difficulties in writing, he or she cannot be able to express him or herself. So it must be flexible in the instruction that you are giving. For example, if there are those ones that cannot read well, can you also be able to explain the instruction verbally? And also, as well as the content that you are giving to the assessment, are you giving it is an oral question, for example, or are you giving it as a test for learners to answer, and putting in mind that all the learners that I have in my class can be able to answer this. So that's the flexibility of the assessment that you're talking about. It must be able to accommodate all the learners, all different types of learners, and the method that you're also going to use. There must be a flexibility in your method to say, okay, I want all learners to be able to present in front of the class. Are they all able to talk? We have to speak clearly. We have some types of learners, maybe they have some difficulties with expressing themselves uh, with a or verbally. Can you allow those learners to be able to uh, answer those questions? For example, in writing. So that is the flexibility of assessment. When you're talking about flexibility in assessment, that those are the areas, those are the concerns or things that you need to look at. Um, reliability. Reliability in assessment has to do with one must be able to get the same uh, type of results when an assessment or task has been judged by more than one person, or you as a teacher, you have assessed it today, and and probably tomorrow as well. You should also be able to get the exact results that that you have allocated to. You won't be able to say, okay, I've allocated this assessment. You are given an assignment or a task or a presentation, and then if a different person comes and assess your work, you probably have given that learner 80%, and then if a different person with the same with for example, a teacher in your area with the same subjects with some subject skills that will probably teaching the same subject at a school can come and assess that learner and probably give him 50 or her 50%, and then there's no reliability there. So reliability in assessment, it's in a sense that if you are giving a task, when you're going to assess those results, at least there must be reliability, there must be consistency in those in that type of assessment, in those types of results. It also means that you are developing the inputs and the process of organizing that type of assessment. There must be consistency, consistent with the standards of the assessment of that subject, for example, and the principles and the policies of that assessment. It should not vary to say, okay, no, this learners this year I've given this type of assessment, and next year I'm going. It should be different, but the learning outcomes that are going to measure should be the same. That is the then that will then be say that assignment or assessment. It can either be a test, can be either an activity, is then reliable. Let me just see if I have those that are not needs to be admitted. Okay, no. Um, and then we have types of reliability. We have the test retest type of assessment, where the same type of assessment or test that you give over and over. You have noticed that your learners did not perform well, so the retest type of reliability is you are giving the same task so that the learners can also be able to perform better, because you have given this task, have given this test, and then majority or all of them failed. So I'm going to give you the same test tomorrow or next week, so you should go and study. So that is the retest. We have the interrate. uh, this is the type of reliability where the same test conducted by different people, to say, okay, this same test is going to be this test that you're given to grade 3 is going to be conducted to the same grade 3A, is the same going to be conducted to 3B, or this activity that you're given to grade 5A should be given to grade 5. So that is the interim type. So the same task or same assignment or same assessment that is consistent for both grades, for the learners to be able to be assessed with the same type of assessment. And we have parallel forms, where different versions of the test, you are assessing the same learning outcome, or you are assessing the same objective, but you are giving it you are assessing it in a different manner. For example, in this test, for example, you've asked learners to list a name in another type of assessment. You probably want them to apply the knowledge to say, compare these two terms, for example. So you are just changing the type or the form of assessment, or the form of questions, rather, to say, okay, I've asked it in this manner, so I can also let me ask it in a maybe you have given a test and then all the learners have passed, they got excellent, to say, okay, maybe the test was really easy, so let me add some difficulty to it so that learners can be able to apply the knowledge. And we have internal consistency, where an individual item of a test is you are testing that type of individual item, to say, okay, I want to test the understanding of validity in this manner and also in this manner. So that is what we call internal consistency. So those are the type of assessment. Reliability, rather. So is reliability as important in assessment? It's very, very important, because it helps us to generalize the results. To say the grade 8 performed well in mathematics because the task that are the task that is given to grade 8A, the test that is given to, I mean, the examination that is given to grade 8A was the same test that was given to grade 8B. I mean, in all that. So it will help you to generalize the results to say, okay, no, grade 8 performed well in these subjects because there was reliability in there was consistency. They wrote the same type of assessment. It's also evidence of consistency of student level at class student level classification to say, okay, all the students are at the same level, because you cannot say the grade 8A and B are at the same level if you have given them different tasks that are not really maybe at the same level of questioning of difficulty. To say, okay, grade 8B was just given a test to name list, and grade 8B was given a test on discussing, explaining, and applying the knowledge. Then you cannot be able to say those tasks, those type of learners are at the same level. So reliability allows makes that possible for the learners to be at the same level. Also, consistent scores over time to maintain the standard and quality of learning. So the consistent score over time to say, okay, if one teacher assesses this and then gives 8 out of 10, and a different teacher assesses this and give 8 out of 10 or 7.5, and it should be at least close. So then you can be able to say, no, there's consistency here, and then the standard is, and the quality of learning on assessment is still the same. It's still of quality. So, what are the factors that really affect reliability? The length of the assessment, for example. How long is the assessment? How long is the test? How long is the activity you are given? You are giving it, for example, the learners are given 2 hours or 3 hours or 30 minutes on a task that really needs enough time. So those are the things that you can also be able to affect the the reliability of that assessment. Sustainability of questions, that's for students being assessed. So when you are sustaining the questions, for example, the same questions that were asked this year is the same question that we're going to ask next year. So that can also be able to affect, because some of the learners can be able to access those type of assessment or those type of questions, and then will affect the reliability of that test. Phrasing or terminologies of the questions, like I said earlier, you cannot be able to put like the way you're asking questions shouldn't really be the same. To say, okay, just list or discuss, you or just put a question in a different, maybe you're going to give a scenario, and then when you give a scenario, then you ask the question according to that scenario. So testing a phenomena or testing an item in a different manner. So these are some of the factors that will affect the reliability. The design, for example, of the marking schedule and the moderation of marking procedures, for example, can also be able to affect, because if the design and the moderation, for example, somebody have moderated the task or the assessment, and it wasn't really properly moderated, maybe, or somebody that have moderated it was not really paying attention. So some of the things that can be able to affect reliability rather, and as well as readiness of the students for the assessment. You didn't really maybe tell the students to prepare for the assessment. You just went on, today we're going to write a test, or now we're going to write a test. So the reliability there can also be able to affect as well, and other factors. There are really a lot. So this is some of the things that can also be able to affect reliability. And then we move on to accountability. What is really accountability in assessment? Accountability is really focusing on the teacher, really here. Even though at some point you are holding the learners accountable, but the teacher, for example, in our schools, the teachers held accountable to say, are you giving quality assessment? Are you giving enough assessments for the learners to test their understanding of the content? Is the assessments that are given to learners of quality? Are you asking the type of questions that learners at that level? So the accountability in assessment is really to hold teachers on account, to say they're really doing their job, and the assessment that they're giving is of quality and is relevant, and it's also giving enough assessment tasks. We move on to validity. Validity is really just the main focus, or the focus here is, are you assessing what you're supposed to assess? The extension to which an assessment measures what it purports to measure. Are you measuring what are you supposed to measure? Are you assessing what you're supposed to assess? So that is really the main focus here on validity. So you have to look at the methods and techniques that are appropriate to assess that knowledge, that skill, or that attribute. Validity can be improved, however, by different things. But however, let me just jump this to go to types of assessment. I mean types of validity. Then I will come back to the other ones. Just sorry about the arrangement there. Um, Types of validity, we have face validity, where the appearance of the assessment, to say, does the assessment item appears to be appropriate. When you are giving an assessment test, for example, it is really the appearance there. Is it really just friendly to the learner, for example? Are the letters visible? There is enough space. So it has to do with the appearance of the task. The content validity is really, does the assessment content cover what you want to assess? The content here is, are you assessing the content that you want to assess? Because if you are assessing about the importance of saving water, and then you maybe or water cycle, and then you omit you left some parts of the water cycle, then you did not really ask. The content validity there may also be losing, because you, it did not really cover the whole content that you want to cover. So the criterion related validity: how well does the test measure what you want to? How well does the test measure the understanding of the learners on that item that you want to assess? That's also that is what criteria according to the criteria that you want. Do you want the learners to discuss, or you want the learners to apply? The type of assessment that you give, is it requiring learners to apply that knowledge? And then the constructive value, does the test measure the concept that is intended to? Are you, when we, for example, we want to measure, like I said, importance of water, and then you in one of your question you put in for example, what is soil, or the importance of soil, where the focus is on water. So then the construct validity there is compromised, because you are just focusing on water. All the questions must be on water. Not you shouldn't you should not be able to put other items that are not relevant there. And then now we move on to the importance of validity. It's just ensure that the outcomes that you want are assessed correctly. So that at least if you want to assess water, or the importance of water, or if you want learners to apply that knowledge, then validity will then determine to say, okay, now this assessment is valid because the outcomes have been assessed. It also ensures that no learning outcomes is left. To say, for example, all what is expected out of this content, all that is expected out of this item that learners should be able to do is asked, because you cannot just ask one part of water and then you left the other part. For example, sorry, I'm using water here, but you can also be able to use addition or subtraction or whatever. So it makes sure that all learning outcomes, what the learners needs to know, is also assessed. That is the reason. That is why. That is the importance of validity in assessment, and it also to avoid obtaining unexpected outcomes here. For example, like I was given example of water, to say you cannot be able to ask the test is about water, and you bring in soil, or you bring in something else. Then so as validity then prevents those unexpected outcomes to come in the assessment, so that then so for it not to compromise the assessment process. Validity can also be now validity can be now improved. How will you improve now the validity of your tasks? Carefully mesh the assessment with the learning objectives, to say, okay, by the end of this lesson, or by the end of this topic, learners are supposed to explain the importance of going to school, or the importance of saving water. So you cannot then, if the learners are expected to explain, you cannot then give an assessment to say, okay, list sources of water, for example. However, then the objective is expecting them to explain, or to apply, or to compare. So you look at the objectives, and then you look at those words. Are they expected to explain? Are they expected to describe? Are they expected to apply the knowledge here? Then you can also, then in that case, you can also you will improve the validity of your assessment. Increase the sample of objectives and contents areas including in any given assessment. use different objectives and content as well, like in different you use different learning outcomes. How do you assess this learning outcome? For example, use different words or different techniques of assessing the same type of learning outcome. um, Use assessment methods that are appropriate for the objective specified. Like I said, you use the assessment method. You cannot the assessment method. For example, the learning outcome is saying learners should be able to express themselves freely in front of others, or they should be able to express themselves. And then you give a type of assessment where learners are going to write about that. Well, while it's a language, for example, it's a language lesson where learners are expected to express themselves freely, like orally. They need to talk, and then you are giving an assessment as an assignment for them to write or for them to draw or something. So it must really be the assessment should be appropriate to the objective that is given. Employ a range of different assessment methods. Use different assessment methods. Don't just give tests, assignments. You can also be able to give presentation or whatever, different types of assessments methods that you can be able to assess. Ensure adequate security and supervision to avoid cheating in examination or in tests or in assignments, for example. So at least make sure that you are looking at those cheating mechanisms. Where if it's a test, at least supervise that test. Don't just give a test and you'll be outside not invigilating and all that things. Or don't just give an assignment. You're not really reading students' work. In this case, for example, in my case, not really looking at how did you reference and all those things. So improve the reliability of assessment. You discuss the reliability to say there must be consistency within your work. So that is how you can also be able to improve validity. And then we'll come to the factors that are affecting validity. What are some of the factors that can affect validity? Teacher's competency of the subject. If the teacher is not really well versed in that subject, can be able to ask maybe simple questions or questions that are not relevant because the person is not really competent in the subject. Cannot be able to use different mechanism of assessing and giving different types of assessment activities, or assess in different or giving different questions that one is asking on assessing on one item, for example, but giving different questions and scenarios and so forth. So the teacher's competence can also be able to affect the validity. Availability of resources for assessment. To say, for example, do you want for example you the objective is expecting the learners to be able to, for example, to do an experiment and present results or so, and then maybe what you need, what the learners need, it's not available. So then that affects the validity of the assessment, because the learners will the resources that is needed for the learner to learn and attain that outcome is compromised because of the lack of resources. The level and age of learners can also be able to affect the validity, because for example, if you have learners in your class, some are at different age, and then some also then when you're giving the task, for example, they might not be it can also be able to affect their ability to say, okay, some of them may not be able to do well like the others of the same age, and then their level of understanding to say, okay, like for example, we have different learners in our classroom. We have those ones that understand the that are good, those ones that are middle, and those ones that are struggling. So it can then also be able to affect the validity of an assignment. Availability of time, the time that you're going to allocate to the assessment. You are giving a test of that probably have 15 questions, and then you are just giving learners 1 hour. Or 20 questions, and you're just giving learners 1 hour. So they will obviously rush into it, answer all the questions, and then it will not really be quality, or the learners work won't be of quality, because you do not really provide enough time for them to answer the questions. Just checking if there's somebody that's asking to come in. So what are the techniques? We'll come to the techniques to establish or to make sure that at least assessment and validity, at least is maintained, or we have uh, validity and reliability within our assessment tools, whether our assessment techniques, when we are giving different assessments. Assessment and marking moderation. When you're giving an assessment or when you're giving a task, give it to your colleague to look at it. If, for example, you teach the same subject at a school, you can be able to look, or to say, okay, can you look at my assessment task? Is it of quality? Is it appropriate? And also can also be able to moderate after you have done marking, because like we said, under reliability, at least there should be consistency in the marks. You cannot give 10 out of 10 and then a colleague can give 5 out of 5. There should be reliability, then is compromised there, as well as validity. So one should moderate your work, your assignments, and your tasks, the tasks that you're giving to your learners. They should be moderated by colleagues or by supervisors, and as well as the marking also should also be moderated. So at least they will be able to see, okay, now you're maintaining the quality, and because the assessment, your tasks are reliable through marking, and also through the type of assignment that you're giving, or the level of difficulty of questioning that you're giving. Collaboration in setting and marking of assignments, like I said earlier, like if you have colleagues, or you have somebody that can also be able to help you. For example, a junior primary, you can also be a grade 2 teacher can also be able to help a grade 3 teacher, for example, or your supervisor, whoever. So you collaborate, you work together. So let's give, if you all teach, for example, one subject at a school, so give the same tasks, and also mark together, and also so you work together, or not just at the same school. You can also work with colleagues from your circuit, from schools that are nearby, and all those things. So collaborate, so that you will then be able to have, okay, the type of assignment that I'm giving here are of quality, because you get inputs from others, and they're reliable, and they're valid, because others are also, the questions that you are setting can also be answered by learners from a different school, that are taught by a different teacher. Then one can also be able to say, now this is quality work, this is quality assessment, and it's valid and reliable. Allocation of reasonable times for assessment tasks. Like I alluded earlier to say, you cannot have like a short period of time, allocate a short period of time to learners, where the assignment or the assessment requires at least for them to engage with the content, to read further, or to think. Or you cannot give it's a five sorry it's a five question task, and you are giving it an 3 hours, depending now on the type of questions. For example, the names are just list, name, draw, and then you are giving it 4 hours or 3 hours, or giving it 2 days or whatever. So it depends what type of task are you giving, and as well as that give at least a reasonable time, so that the students can also be able to get time to engage with the content, and as well as give yourself a reasonable time, or give your colleagues reasonable time to mark, not just sorry, excuse me, to mark, and also be able to moderate your work. Because if you just, oh, no, just moderate my work here, 5 minutes, I want to go and give it to my learners right now, I want them. So then that won't be of quality, because one needs to go through and look at what are the learning outcomes, like we discussed earlier. Look at the learning outcomes. No, the learners here are supposed to express themselves in front of others. They should be able to have to do a presentation. However, the teacher is giving them a task to write, or task to draw. So one needs to give either colleagues or learners enough time for moderation, so that reliability and validity can be achieved through assessment. So this is the reference list. These are some of the sources that you can also be able to read further on, where we take some of these ideas. So that is just to draw your attention to those that came in. We were discussing the principle of assessment, validity, reliability. That is number 3. And then I said we jumped to, because really it focusing on us understanding assessment policies in Namibia. And like I said earlier, we have different subjects. So we have general assessment policies, and then if you focus on different subjects, you will not be able to finish. However, I'm going to create a platform where we can also be able to give inputs from different assessment policies. I'm going to upload the policies, then we engage with the discussion on the LMS. That is not going to be an assignment. It's just a discussion. So that is all I've prepared for tonight. If there are some questions, yes. Yeah, come in. Come. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. So that is all from my side. That is what I've prepared. Unless if there are questions or comments, then we can leave it here for now. Questions or comments or questions on anything? Yes, Mr. Gabriel. Mr. Gabriel, that the floor is yours. You can just unmute yourself and then speak.
No, I was just giving feedback that it was fine, it was well received, the notes, and thank you for the notes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. That's very good of you. Thank you. Any other question? Okay, everything is clear. If everything is clear, then we can just leave it there. And like I said, this is a semester module. Let me just remind you, this is a semester module, so we need to complete 3 tasks, and then the second task needs to be completed before the second to the 24th of April, and that is going to be a test. So I think we're going to write a test the week of. Let me just confirm. And it's going to be written on what we've discussed. So the week of 17 to 23rd, we are going to have a test. I'm just going to look at if we're going to have a multiple choice type of test where everybody can be able to take it on their own time, or we're going to write at the same time. It will also depend on what is the favorable time for us. Can we be free on one time, and we can also be able to take it to weekends on Saturdays or Sundays. It also depends. We'll actually engage on the WhatsApp group. However, the third task then would be done, I think, earlier May there. So that will be our last task. We need to complete 3 tasks. And then that will be our third task would be a project. So it will be given, I think, soon, probably that week or so, that project will be given. I think I'm going to think about it's going to be an individual project, or it's going to be a group project, because it will carry 60% of the whole total mark, because this is does not have examination. So the project is going to carry 60% of the total mark of your whole assessment. So thank you very much for coming in and attending, and we'll engage more on the WhatsApp group as well. Have a good evening.